Well, hello all you wonderful people out there in YouTube land, and welcome to this 2025 12 Days of Christmas HO scale product review. Now, before you here, we have a Athearn. I can't remember if this is Genesis or Ready to Roll. Ready to Roll. Athearn Ready to Roll Union Pacific gas turbine. This is not mine, though I do wish it was. This is on loan for the purposes of a product review from, yet again, another model from Mr. Moe's collection. So, let's take a look and get into it. Unboxing this thing is a breeze. First, right here, just like this, and lift up. That will reveal a foam, well, that'll reveal your warranty form right here. Exploded parts diagram for the fuel tender. And the full owner's manual, well, maybe not the full owner's manual, but a brief synopsis, exploded parts diagram for the locomotive, body shell, chassis, and drive. This engine does have one can motor with dual flywheels, as you can see here, and only the inner trucks of this engine's 4 trucks are powered. The outer 2 trucks are idle axles. You have a parts list, maintenance, DCC installation. This is a DCC ready model. You have this little synopsis on the veranda turbine. You can read that if you want to. I'm not going to. You have this foam right here that lifts up to reveal the locomotives sitting in plastic cradles inside of plastic sleeves, resting in this master cradle here. To remove the engine and fuel tender, bada bing, bada boom. Right here you have some extra detail parts, a little bell, looks like some spare hand railings or grab irons. That's pretty much it. So we'll clear off the master box and master cradle, and we'll take a look at getting these guys out of their little individual protective sleeves and cradles. Alright, starting out with the fuel tender. First thing I'm going to do, obviously, I'm going to slide this thing out of the sleeve. So it's now free of the sleeve. We'll set that back there. The next thing, you have this little latch right there. Pop that sucker off. The top opens up and the fuel tender is now free. Now you have this end right here, and you have this end with a headlight. It is a dummy headlight. It does not work. So we'll set this guy on the track. And it is rinse, wash, and repeat to get the locomotive out of the sleeve and cradle. And try not to drop it or get any of the details snapped off. We'll set this guy down. and couple up coupler. All right, so getting right into this, the first thing I notice is a nice, clean, evenly applied paint job all the way throughout. The lettering on this thing is exquisite. There is no bleed over, there is no fogginess. The paint separation between the red, the yellow, the gray, and yes, the black outlining around the block letters is exquisite. I've been up and down this thing with a fine-tooth comb, and the only thing I have found detrimental to the quality of this model has been this coupler right here on the fuel tender. It was low. It was very, very low, and I had to switch it out with, well, I didn't have to, but I chose to switch it out with a Katy coupler. Other than that, everything on this model is everything you would expect from Athearn trains. So we're going to start out here on the fuel tender. You'll notice that there are loads of separately applied details. These hand railings and grab irons along the top are exquisite, and they are a very flexible and rather forgiving plastic. So while I'm not saying if you get one of these, crimp down on them, they can handle a little accidental bumpage. They're not super fragile. The walkways are actually a see-through, separately applied grate. So you have a freestanding, separately applied walkway up top here. The trucks are very well done in this exquisite silver that really just pops, and it really allows you to see all of the details. You have the brake shoes on either side of the wheels. You've got the frictionless bearing type journals here. You have the various shocks here, the springs here. You have everything you would expect to see on these fuel trucks or fuel tender trucks is there. You have these nice separately applied ladders on each corner of the car, and as you can see there, you have a separately applied hand brake wheel. I'm going to flip this thing around, and as you can see, maybe I also swapped that coupler out for a Katy coupler just because, why not? The couplers on this thing were way too low. So we'll move the camera. Again, you can see the separately applied ladders, the non-operational headlight, which could very easily be made operational if you're into that sort of thing. I am, but this ain't mine, so I ain't doing it. You do have separately applied but non-operational coupler cut levers. And you have a nicely detailed crossover walkway on either end, and a airline right here. There's also an airline on the other end of the tender. Looking at the underside of this fuel tender, I was a little disappointed with the lack of detail, but then again, you know, there's not really a whole lot of space to work with underneath here. You have this service and emergency reservoir here. You have the triple valve for the air brake system, and you have the air brake cylinder right here, as well as linkages and rods associated with a train's air brake system. And you have the air line for the big air running through the reservoir tank here and here. And something I neglected to mention, there's some nice rivet detailing here along the base of the tank, and you do have the prototypical F designating the front of the tender right here. so that I can say I did it, and so you guys could see it for yourselves, that see-through great detailing on this separately applied catwalk here on the top of the tank is great. I absolutely love it. This is probably one of my favorite features of this locomotive, which, yeah, I know I'm pathetic, but that honestly is one of my favorite features on this locomotive detail-wise. You've also got the filling hatch right here, separately applied. You have another little hatch right here, and you can see some little divots and whatnot down below the grate. I don't know if that's prototypical or just a process of their injection molding that they do to make these models, but either way, it looks right. That's good enough for me, and you know. All right, starting off with the business end of this beast, you can see a nicely done, separately applied coupler cut lever here attached to the pilot. Now, much like model toy train locomotives, O-gauge toy train locomotives, the pilot is free swinging separate from the nose. Now, that's actually prototypical in this case. They had to make it like that because of the fact that this thing would have to go through curvature that a fixed pilot just would not allow. Which is very fortunate for model train operators, because our curvatures are a lot tighter in most cases than prototypical railroads. So if you're curious, a prototypically accurate mainline curve in HO scale would be a tight curve. A tight curve would be somewhere around about a 10-foot diameter for a tight mainline curve, prototypically speaking, in HO scale. So obviously most model railroaders ain't got that amount of space, so sacrifices have to be made. Thankfully, in this instance, it's not really a sacrifice, it's actually a prototypical feature. Excuse me. You have this gorgeous Union Pacific Herald with the wings, which is very nicely done. It wraps around the nose. It's, from what I can tell, perfectly centered and level. You know, neither end of the wings is higher than the other. You have these separately applied grab irons here on either side of this cast-on door with a latch detailing. You have the headlights. You have the signal light. Now, these are directionally operated. So when the locomotive is in reverse, the signal light here turns red. The headlight turns off. Moving further up the nose, you have the prototypically accurate green roof on the nose, and you have these nicely done, separately applied grab irons on either side of the locomotive nose. And right here, this little notch that you see, that is actually the sand filling nozzle for the locomotive's sand, which, if you don't know, excuse me, sand is used on the prototypical railroads, not just by diesels, but also back in the steam days, to aid with traction. So starting off a heavy train on wet rail, or a steep grade, or just keeping a train moving on a steep grade, or even stopping a train on a steep grade, the engineer will use sand as needed to help give the wheels a little extra bite. You have a nicely detailed cab with seats. There's a seat here on the fireman's side and a seat here on the engineer's side. You can see the separately applied windshield wipers here on the front windshields. Dual facing single chime air horn. Excuse me. You have these separately applied grab irons above the windshields. You have these separately applied grab irons here along the sides of the top of the cab. And you have just all of this detail here for what, I'm going to be honest, I have no clue what any of this on the prototype is for. But it looks good. It looks very good. It looks very realistic. From photos I have seen of the real thing, to include on the propaganda sheet for this model. Very well done. This is not at the same level of like the scale trains veranda turbine that I reviewed last year, excuse me, 2 years ago rather, but it is still a very, very, very nice engine at a fraction of the cost of that one. This is an older Athearn RTR engine, and it is DCC ready, so there's no DCC on board. But if you want that locomotive without spending $1,000, this is a great option. You've also got these number boards here, X65, X-65, and 65. Matching number boards with the matching road number, and that is a prototypical practice of both Union Pacific and Southern Pacific for their number boards to throw an X on it. The reason being is this is a freight service engine. All freight trains, with the abolishment of passenger trains, which are run as extras. If you're modeling in the transition era or modern era, essentially all freight trains are run as extras. They're not run on a schedule. Very few are run on a schedule. If you're talking modern times, ain't a damn one of them on a schedule. Looking at these trucks, you can see you have the leaf springs here. You have the roller bearings here. You have the prototypically correct 2 cylinders per side frame per truck. You have the brake shoes here, here, the visible ones on the outer edges of the truck. Excuse me. And you also have the normal shock absorbing springs here, 2 pair on either end of the truck, on either side of the leaf springs. So 2 per side of the leaf springs per side frame per truck. The catwalk along the side, or the veranda from which this engine gets its name, along the side of the locomotive has a very nicely done, relatively forgiving and flexible handrail, and it's pretty close to scale. It's very nicely done. Obviously separately applied. You can see there's some cast on grill detailing here, and you do have the appropriate door and latch arrangements along the side of the hood of the locomotive. So focusing on the center of this engine now, you see here what is a fuel tank, small fuel tank. I believe it's a fuel tank. Lots of doors, lots of latches and compartments right here. Some more cast on grill detailing here. So again, we're not dealing with the same level of detail as the scale trains UP turbine that I looked at a couple of years ago, but it's not far off. And for the actual cost of this thing, I'd wager that yes, the scale trains museum quality turbine was an immaculate, gorgeous engine. But the downside was you were paying a lot of money for an engine that had a lot of very fragile, easily broken parts. Versus this guy, you're paying a third, a fifth of the cost of that scale train's locomotive. You don't have as many easily broken off details. You have more details that are going to hold up over time and tolerate handling of the locomotive much better than the scale trains model ever could. And I'm not knocking the scale trains model in favor of this one. I'm just trying to give an honest review. Yes, this has a little bit less detail, but it's still a magnificent locomotive. You have these separately applied ladders here, and there are 2 more on the fireman's side of the locomotive. We are on the engineer's side of the locomotive, remember. And of course you can see the 2 additional trucks back here. Now like I said, these 2 trucks are the trucks that actually have the gears that drive the locomotive, that pull the train. These 2 are dummy trucks. The only thing they do is pick up electrical current and help guide the locomotive around curves. That's it. They add nothing in the way of tractive effort. Okay, here we are on the rear of the locomotive. If you couldn't figure that out, I'm helping you out. This is the rear. There is a door back in here, and you can see this little window. Well, that is a little compartment where the engineer would go back and fire up the steam turbine, or gas turbine rather. There was also some stuff in there he would check, and a steam generator. You have separately applied ladder here. You have these separately applied, very flexible, very forgiving, plastic grab irons and handrails here. You've got lots of detail, a separately applied coupler cut lever right there, an air hose, the plastic magnetic knuckle coupler that this engine comes with. Just like on the front pilot, the rear pilot on this thing is free swinging with the truck assembly, just like an O-gauge locomotive. I don't know how well you can see it, but there are 2 separately applied grab irons here and here, as well as a door right here. The pilot does have safety tread, non-slip safety tread, and as you can see right here, a separately applied handbrake wheel with the appropriate rigging and stand. Okay, while I said this thing has less details, but the details it does have are more durable and forgiving than the Scale Train's museum quality turbine that I reviewed a couple years ago, they are still fragile. They can be very easily broken if you're not careful. Given this is not my locomotive, I don't want to handle this thing any more than I absolutely have to. Would the owner be particularly upset if a small grab iron or so broke off? No, probably not. But I don't want to take that chance, because that dude does loan me some great stuff to review. Excuse me. Moving on. Here we are looking at the top of this engine. You can see this freestanding separately applied pipe detailing right here. You've got these cast-on grill details all over the side of this thing. The exhaust stack for the turbine. A separately applied walkway here. A filter box, I'm guessing. Lots more cast-on grill detailing. You've got all kinds of stacks for the I take it back, diesel engine. This thing had a diesel engine, a small diesel engine, in addition to the turbine. That way, if it had to move itself around, it was a lot cheaper to fire up the diesel engine that was back here. That would power the traction motors, so that you could hustle this thing around in the yard, not have to fire up the very expensive, very maintenance intensive turbine. Because these things, they would drink like an alcoholic at an open bar. I'll tell you what, they would drink fuel like crazy. You have another freestanding separately applied pipe detail right back here. You've got some little filler nozzles of some variety here. I'm assuming those are for sand. Just a bunch of stuff on here, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't know what a lot of it is. I mean, I really don't care. It looks great. That's That's really the big thing, at least for most of us, is that we don't necessarily need to know what the hell it does on the real thing. Just need to know that it looks right, it looks great, it looks scale, and that's about all I have with this model. Let me take a look. Okay, so underneath the cab here and here there are speaker holes. There is a speaker assembly already in place for you to add sound to this locomotive in addition to excuse me, in addition to DCC. So if you add a DCC sound decoder in here, you have the provisions for speakers right here. Now, I have a short train made up on the Stars Hollow Railroad for this thing, and yes, it will handle 18-inch radius curves. I threw every single piece of rolling stock I have on the railroad behind this thing, and it pulled it without hesitation. I do not know what this thing is capable of pulling. Obviously, I'm not going to be running a train that long, but if you find one of these, or you decide you want one of these, and you know where you can get one for a decent price, they are fantastic engines. As you will see here shortly, smooth pulling locomotives, good silent runners, good smooth runners, and they will do their damnedest to pull your house off the foundation. They'll pull whatever you put behind them.